So hello and welcome to today's Geoscience Career Panel hosted by EarthScope Consortium and the Cascadia Region Earthquake Science Center, CRESCENT. My name is Emily Zawacki. I am a Science Communication Associate at EarthScope Consortium, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this panel. We're joined today by 5 geoscience professionals who will be sharing real-world experiences and career insights. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the people who made this event possible. A big thank you to our organizers, Shannon Fasola from CRESCENT, and Jillian Haberly and Kelsey Russo-Nixon from EarthScope. We are grateful for your time, coordination, and dedication in planning today's panel. So a few quick notes about today's panel. Only the panelists and myself will speak. If you have a comment or question at any point, and please ask questions to the panelists, please concisely type it into the Q&A box and not in the chat box. At the end, I will read audience questions to the panelists. If similar questions have been asked, I may combine or skip them. If the webinar crashes due to Zoom or internet issues, it will be rebooted. Just click the same webinar link again. We also have closed captioning available, which does have language translation capabilities. Just click on the captions button on your Zoom control bar at the bottom of your screen. And a recording of this panel will be available to view later on EarthScope's YouTube channel and CRESCENT's website. Now, let's go ahead and have our panelists give a brief introduction to themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Clark. I am a geologist. I currently work at Berry Corporation in Bakersfield, California as a regulatory and compliance geologist.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob DeGroot. I'm with the United States Geological Survey Earthquake Science Center based in Pasadena in Southern California. And I am a part of the Shakeler Earthquake Early Warning System. I help do all kinds of things relative to communication and education and outreach. But one of my biggest jobs is to get people to actually use the data from the Shakeler system to open firehouse doors, protect water supplies, slow down trains, and protect children in schools. So lots of interesting stuff. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tina Dura. I'm an assistant professor at Virginia Tech, and I am a coastal geologist. I use a stratigraphic record and sediments to reconstruct catastrophic changes that have occurred along coastlines from big subduction zone earthquakes.
Hi, I'm Allison Perch. I'm a geotechnical engineer based out of Portland, Oregon. Chile earthquake was 2010. So 2010, 2011, started working with ASCE to learn more about seismic resilience and policy and how engineering and policy can be combined to actually make us more resilient. So I've had 2 jobs since 2010 where I'm a standard geotechnical engineer, as well as have been working on the resilience and resilience planning side, starting from seismic, but pulling in climate as well. I currently work for Stantec, so I went from the smaller geotechnical firms into a large engineering firm, and I am the chair of the Oregon State Policy Commission, Oregon State Seismic Policy Advisory Commission.
I am Hannah Rabinowitz. I am the Earthquake, Tsunami, and Volcano Program Manager for FEMA Region 10. So that's Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Alaska. My background is in earthquake geophysics. And then I will talk about this more in a bit, but did a science policy fellowship where I was able to dive into energy and water risk assessment and resilience. So really excited that I get to have a job now where I kind of bring together that geophysics and risk kind of perspective and parts of my interest.
All right, fantastic. Thank you all. So the first question we have for the panelists is kind of getting a little bit into the career paths and how they got to where they are. So we'd like to ask, did your career path to your current role include any unique experiences or unexpected turns? We'll open that up to whoever would like to answer first.
I can go first just because I kind of referenced it in my intro. So I did my PhD in earthquake geophysics, focused on shallow subduction zones, and started a postdoc doing still earth kind of brittle ductile transition experimental work. So did rock mechanics. And I kind of decided academia wasn't for me, and I was really interested in policy and was able to apply for and get a placement for a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, working at the Department of Energy. And I think that was an experience that really opened a lot of doors, because it gave me an opportunity kind of outside of my academic training, to learn a little bit about how to apply that background to more policy and just applied spaces. And I think gave me the tools to move into these other parts of my career. So I think that was a really great opportunity. And I know that AAAS has been working to kind of expand their science and policy technology fellowships. When I was doing it, they really just had like legislative and executive branch placements, but I think they're trying to expand it to also having placements in the private sector as well.
All right, we'll go to
I'm
Tina
happy to go.
next.
Yeah, so I was a geology major in undergrad, but I wasn't quite ready to go directly to grad school. I knew I wanted to continue my studies eventually, but I took kind of a winding path to get there. So the first thing I did was I worked for a mud logging company in North Dakota randomly, got some experience kind of in that industry. And then I also ended up teaching earth science in high school for about a year, which was a really good experience that gave me kind of a background in teaching that I think a lot of assistant professors don't have when they first start out. So that was a big challenge and actually kind of solidified my interest in moving on to grad school. I didn't think I could cut it as a high school teacher for much longer. It's a really tough job, but a great job for the right person. But I just think it gave me a lot of good background as I started my path in academia. And then I did have a chance during my master's to do an internship at an oil and gas company. And that again kind of helped just guide my decision to stay in academia rather than like shift gears. So I just think it's good to dip into different types of work. And I just try to keep everything very geology adjacent. And so it all kind of worked together to give me like a solid background as I started as an assistant professor eventually.
Awesome. Then we'll go on to Allison next.
Yeah, thank you. I also alluded to it a little bit in mine. As an engineering student, I don't think that you ever anticipate the fact that you're going to be dealing with policy and politics and that type of thing. And so I started out with the American Society of Civil Engineers Technical Committee on Lifeline Earthquake Engineering. And I got onto it because my grad school professor and I had a conversation about how I needed an earthquake in a Spanish-speaking country, so that I could get on to the team with my language skills. And 2 weeks later, Chile happened, and so he still to this day jokes that I caused earthquakes. Anyway, I got to go with them. Got really well connected with many of you probably know Yume Wong. And several others that have been really active in Oregon and Washington on seismic policy issues. And then got back home and Yume started throwing me in front of groups of 400 people to talk about it. So that's another one where I was never comfortable in public speaking and now can pretty much roll around and do whatever comes my way. So don't be scared of it. Definitely go forward. And I would say the professional organizations, whatever your specialty is a really great way to just make connections as well. Not only if you're looking for a job, but if you're in the consulting world, it's a good place to connect with clients. But it's just a way to get involved in those types of things and meet like-minded people. So I'm now a part of the Infrastructure Resilience Division at ASCE and other things. And that's really kind of launched my career in a different direction, and allowed me to have a lot of different different topics that we're coming across and getting into different areas that are all adjacent to geotechnical engineering and super interesting. But I would just say keep yourself open to different opportunities and put yourself out there as much as possible.
Never underestimate the influence of something that happens to you when you're very young, because that could really set up the trajectory when you're older. I'm a little older than maybe most people in this group, and I experienced my first earthquake when I was 3 years old. It was back in 1971, and it was the San Fernando earthquake, magnitude 6.6 here in Southern California. And even at a young age, I was sort of set up for something that eventually would land me here at the USGS many, 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 many years later. I actually, sort of for my undergraduate experience, I sort of did a lot of different things. In fact, I started out in chemistry. So, here I was in the back of a lab, and I did my undergrad at Occidental College in Los Angeles, and back of a lab doing enzyme binding studies. And I'm also reading Buddhist texts for one of my religions in East Asia course. And I liked religion so much, I actually took a degree in religious studies when I was there, in addition to the work I did in chemistry. And I ended up teaching chemistry at the undergrad level. But there was that thing about earthquakes that always drew me back to the events, and being involved in sort of understanding the larger sort of relationship of earthquakes to society, and how I could have a role in influencing not only keeping people safe, is what I do with the USGS, is I do public safety, but also the education side of it. So I was able to sort of gather all the tools that I had, and you just have to realize that, you go through life and you're just assembling this massive toolbox of all these different skills and these experiences. And you know what? They all are valuable. They all can be used for something when you get older. And so I guess one thing is that, be reflective, take the time to sort of think about the twists and turns, because I've had enough of them in my life, and I'm old enough to have many, many twists and turns. But gosh, look where I'm exactly where I want to be. And with all those different experiences, and maybe I didn't do the traditional geophysics major, but I came in through a very interesting pathway, and of course, a lifelong sort of relationship with earthquakes. Thanks.
Brandon, if you wanted to go
Yeah.
last.
Yeah, I'll chime in there as well. I guess I'll kind of talk to some things that happened to me pretty recently. So, like going into college, I kind of knew that I wanted to go into the industry, the oil and gas industry, and look for oil and plan wells and things of that nature. And then just like last year, a new opportunity came to me where now I'm dealing with like regulatory projects, and that's something I never really envisioned doing when I was coming out of school. And so now, using my geology background, using my experience of, planning wells and stuff at, the well by well case, now I'm over here kind of managing projects for fields where we have injection going on, whether we're putting water in the ground as steam or disposing of it as water, just to dispose of it to, increase the amount of oil production we have. And that's just something I never envisioned myself doing. And, it just kind of stumbled upon me. Uh, I've been learning ever since I got in this role, and it's actually something I've, grown to kind of enjoy and kind of, get a better appreciation for what we do out here in California. Because before I did not know all the ins and outs of what goes into, putting these projects together, getting approval from the state, and dealing with the EPA as well. So, um, there's a lot of different avenues your career can take, and sometimes you just got to be, open to something new.
Right, fascinating to hear so many different career paths. Now we got a very brief intro to everybody's positions and kind of what they do, but to learn a little bit more about what actually happens in the job of a geoscience professional, our next question is, could you describe a recent project that you worked on? Doesn't have to be interesting. Anything is cool.
I might actually talk about my favorite project because it's my favorite project. So on the geotechnical engineering side, I got to do the geotechnical engineering for the elephant exhibit at the Oregon Zoo, which, for those that don't know, Portland geology is built on a gigantic landslide. So we came into it with an architect from Philadelphia who didn't understand about seismic risk and didn't understand about landslides, and came in and wanted to dig a gigantic hole so that they could put elephants going through a tunnel underground under a bridge. So there's all this, you have to have grade separation and everything, so that you have to have an elephant's trunk is maximum 12 feet, a human arm is maximum 4 feet. So you have to have, or excuse me, 10 feet, 4 feet. So you have to have a minimum of 15 feet closure of any place where a human and an elephant can touch. So it was like, you're going to be doing this at the end of they wanted to basically dig the whole toe of the landslide out 15 feet below groundwater and wanted it to be dry. So I got to come in and be the bad guy and say, how much money do you want to spend on this? Because everything is doable from an engineering standpoint. It's just a matter of how much money you want to throw at it. So we ended up putting in gigantic tieback walls and a whole bunch of soil nail walls to build out where they needed to. We took a bunch of the material that was moved and moved it over into a different field and put in a geothermal link to it. And the entire time we got to do all of our drilling and engineering and everything around animals, which is also super fun. Plus, it's just really fun to try to figure out what the loads are for a breeding elephant, and what that looks like and how you have to design that from an engineering standpoint. Also, the fence posts all had to be designed for the largest elephant running 7 miles an hour, I think, hitting it. So I'm just really working very closely with a structural engineer on a bunch of loads that we had never figured out before. So that's on the geotechnical side.
Never would have imagined the intersection between elephants and geoscience, but there you go. We'll go to Robert.
Sure. I have a good friend who's a professor emeritus from Oregon State University. His name is Bob Lilly, and he wrote a book called Parks and Plates. And I found sort of was really always very enchanted by this idea of being at a national park or some natural area and really understanding how that place got to be the way it is, and understanding sort of the plate tectonic story behind it, and using the place as a jumping off point for these sorts of things. And so a recent project, and still ongoing actually, I'm working with some colleagues at the University of Oregon on this and a contractor to really sort of amplify that message. And so we're setting up these resources for national parks and national monuments throughout the West. So places like Yosemite and Death Valley and Mount Rainier and Crater Lake, to tell the story about, like, to help amplify the story about plate tectonics in the place for people from all over the world, or even people from local places, and really sort of making the context for them, and really giving them a sense of the place, but also how to stay safe using shake alert, earthquake early warning. So it's not just that we're going to pound them over the head. And a lot of times people approach sort of earthquake readiness from sort of the death and destruction standpoint. That doesn't work. We try to sort of bring people into the context and say there's something you can do to keep yourself safe. And of course, in the states that we're working in, California, Oregon, Washington, you can take advantage of early warning, but also know what to do if you feel shaking or if you get an alert. So we've really had a lot of fun bringing together all these different pieces from the education and from sort of the social interactions, encouraging people to talk about this stuff, but also building partnerships with the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management and universities. So we got a lot of people sort of helping with the message, but they're also presenting it from their perspective, through their lenses. So thanks.
Great, and then we'll go over to Tina.
All right. So I'm a coastal geologist, and a lot of my recent work has focused on the Cascadia subduction zone offshore of Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Canada. And one of the projects we're working on recently is using the coastal sedimentary record to track the full inland extent of tsunami inundation. So we haven't had a recent earthquake at Cascadia, so it's you know, part of the big challenge there is trying to predict what you can expect during the next big earthquake and tsunami. And we really need to rely on the geologic record to do that because we don't have instrumental observed records there. And so what we do is we take sediment cores along the coast. We take hundreds of cores. We often use these anomalous sand beds that we find in coastal estuaries to kind of track where tsunami inundation has gone. But we're finding that those sand beds don't really reflect the full inundation extent of tsunamis. So we're using other techniques like microfossils to track the transported sediment further inland. And you might be wondering why we have to go through this level of painstaking detail. But it's really important to constrain models that people do. There's, you can put earthquakes on the subduction zone. You say it's a magnitude 8.5 or 9 and simulate tsunamis, but we don't really know what the answer is and what it's going to look like unless we have kind of a verification or a way to validate those models. And that's where the geology comes in. And so, yeah, we get really muddy and field work is super fun. And then we have this important data set that we can share and try to work with people who are preparing coastal residents and such for future events.
All right, it looks like we'll go over to Hannah.
So I will just kind of mention a couple of different things. So my role in FEMA, I'm kind of the geophysics, geohazard resource or subject matter expert for our region. And so a lot of my kind of day-to-day work is mostly focused on mitigation and preparedness efforts. So one big project that I worked on with earthquake program managers for the other Western regions was putting together an earthquake mitigation guide that kind of walked through how communities could think about their earthquake risk, different kinds of cascading hazards that they might want to consider, and then how to build those pieces of information into their hazard mitigation plans and potentially start to look for funding to actually implement some projects that could mitigate their earthquake risk. So that's kind of more on the long-term planning side of the spectrum, I guess. But obviously, people probably know about FEMA more from the agency's role in emergency response and recovery. So I also spend time supporting those aspects of the mission as well. Again, kind of as a subject matter expert, but one example recently is we've had a very active tsunami summer and actually volcanoes. Everything is kind of popping off in the Northwest at the moment. But at the end of July, we had the magnitude 8.8 Kamchatka earthquake that generated a tsunami that had inundation in Hawaii, Alaska, and then from obviously Canada down through California. And so I basically got a call at like 5:30 while I was playing with my baby from my boss, like, you might want to get online now. Fortunately, was able to call in the neighbors to come help out because my husband was on a plane back home from a work trip. And just kind of spent the night just keeping track of what information NOAA was putting out and being the person who was able to talk to the subject matter experts kind of from other agencies, more of the scientists, and translate what they were saying to our response staff so they could make decisions about what FEMA needed to be thinking about or doing. Fortunately, it was a tsunami that didn't really have too much impact in our states, but yeah, that's kind of part of the job that that is interesting, and we're always happy when we have less impactful events that we can test out everything that we need to be doing.
Great. And then let's hand it over to Brandon.
Okay, so I'm gonna discuss kind of a project that I've been working on last couple of months that we acquired when we merged with another company last year. And so one thing I guess to make clear, I kind of mentioned it earlier, I deal a lot with regulatory projects, and I'm not sure if many are familiar with oil and gas in California, but we have these projects called underground injection control projects where we're injecting fluids in the subsurface to enhance oil recovery. So where it's like I said, water or steam is being, water is being heated into steam to help, reduce the viscosity of oil, or we're injecting fluids into the subsurface just to reduce the amount of overall gross fluid withdrawal for kind of a material balance. And so one of these projects we've acquired from a company was a water disposal project. And so you can imagine we're getting this for the first time, all the details, and we're trying to work with the state to kind of update them on the project and finish the process that the previous company was, going through with them in terms of updating the well counts, volumes, etc. And so in that time, we're having to gather the data, make sure the data that we have from that company is correct and aligns with what's at the state. And if it doesn't, we have to, provide the updates. Why was it, why weren't the numbers lining up? And then in addition to that, I have to work with the development teams to understand, hey, is this project sufficient for what we want to do going forward? They only wanted to drill this many wells. Do we still want that many? Do we need more? Do we need less? And so I'm going back and forth with other engineers and geologists to kind of understand what the company wants to do going forward. And then if the current constraints aren't, large enough for us, we have to go and do the work, submit the calculations to kind of show that we've evaluated the area for a larger footprint. Or, the inverse, we realize we don't need as much as they may have been asking. So now we're trying to figure out what is the limit of what we're comfortable with. Okay, we only need 20 of these 40 wells. We can, work with that, and therefore we've now reduced our footprint, and that looks good for the state in terms of like, hey, we're keeping these projects, we're reducing the size of these projects. And then for us, it's, for management trying to decide what project we're going to do. Well, now this project has a less, less capital that needs to be invested because we're able to make do with half the wells that were previously planned. So that's kind of like the process and the things that go, um, uh, the things that happen when I'm evaluating these projects and trying to, get all the documents put together to submit to the state. And so that's just an example of a recent project I've been working on.
Right. So now, in addition to academic and technical background, there's a lot of other factors that can influence your career path. So the next question for our panelists is, have family, financial, or personal pressures influenced your career decisions? We can go to Hannah.
So I would say that I mentioned earlier that when I was doing my PhD and postdoc, I was doing rock mechanics. And I think that one thing, among a lot of other considerations, but one of the things that I think made me not so sure that I wanted to stay in that space is that I really did not want to be stuck in the lab late at night and not able to like come home, especially when I started to think about like a future when I had a family. Um, and yeah, so I would say that that was definitely not the only factor, but one consideration.
Okay, then we'll go to Brandon.
Yeah, so for me, kind of in grad school, I kind of went a certain direction based on some of the grants that were available, I would say. And so prior to grad school, I had been heavily focused on seismology, geophysics, and things of that nature. And one of the professors that I took a course from, a geochemistry course, when I was at Penn State, he was like, "Hey, I have this grant I've been working on with a couple other institutions, and a different field than you normally, worked in, but you did good in my class. You're a really good student. How does oceanography sound? And I was like, yeah, I'm not too sure, but it sounds like I'll be using some of the geochemistry to do some of the evaluations, and there was a lot of people who had already done some work with some of the cores that they had, and so I was like, I've never had the opportunity to go into an oceanography, geochemistry, course in that detail. So I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. So that kind of influenced my, decision into if I want to stick with geophysics in grad school and then or go this geochemistry route and, do some ocean modeling. So yeah.
All right, and let's hear from Allison next. I think you accidentally muted, Allison.
Thank you. So I am single, so I can't say that there was a lot of family. Yes, there have been family issues back and forth that affect things one way or the other. They definitely have an impact. Um, but I think it's changed significantly in the 25 years that I've been in the industry. And I will say I was at an ASCE event probably 5 years ago, sitting at a table where there were 2 or 3 women of my vintage and 2 or 3 women of a younger vintage. And they sat down and said they had denied project management training because they looked at their managers and didn't want to work that hard. So they didn't think they'd do project management training. And I will say it broke my freaking heart. Like, we are in a place where make it work. Do what you want to do and have a passion at work and figure out how to make it at home. And if you have a partner that doesn't allow you to do that, frankly, find another partner. If that's what it is. Like she should be supporting, they should be supporting what you do and making yourself happy. And if you want to do something at work to fulfill your ability to do it at work, figure out how to make it done. We are in a society, or we're in a place where we can make the workplace work for us. Find a workplace that works for you and find a family that works for you, but don't give up either personal or workplace one way or the other. I think it's really, politics aside, we're getting to a place where we should be making the world the way that we need it to be happy, and just do it. Don't sit down and say no to opportunities because of one thing or another.
Great, and let's hand it over to Tina.
So I guess going off from that a little bit, I stubbornly just wanted to be an academic. I always wanted to be a professor. I saw myself working at a university from, I don't know, a young age for some reason. But I also really wanted a family, so I kind of stubbornly have done both. And it's a lot of work. I have 2 young boys, 8 and 4.5. And yeah, every day is a juggling act, but I think my choice of Virginia Tech as an institution was influenced by having a family. I feel like it's a really balanced academic workplace, unlike some others that I've heard about. And so, there are other professors here with families, and I saw that when I interviewed, and it just felt like a place that I could try to make this work. It's not for everyone, and I find all these other paths very fascinating today. But yeah, in my mind, like, it is possible, and you have to make the most of every minute, every day. But I don't often work long weekends or anything. I just am really dialed in 9 to 5, and then I have family time. And so, yeah, it's definitely juggling act, and it influences decisions about travel and things like that. But overall, it's possible to make it work.
Okay, so we have one more question for the panelists before we move into our audience Q&A section. So next, we'd like to know, how have you effectively translated the skills you learned in the classroom or either other training into something your employers value?
Coming from a very engineering background, I would say the most important skill that I have has nothing to do with engineering. Communication, whether written or oral, is the #1 thing that you need to be able to do. And you can use AI all you want, but we've been using it quite a bit, and yeah, it makes you sound good, but it doesn't necessarily say anything. So don't count on that for your communication. I wouldn't say that it was I have a liberal arts degree before I had my engineering degrees. So I came into it from a little different route. But that's the number one thing that that has helped me in my career, that has been chatted about with others, that people introduce me as, and that frankly I need in my staff that I hire. So if there's anything that you want to bone up on written and oral communication, and being able to talk about technical aspects to lay people and understand what it is, because everything that we do is based on government money and infrastructure and policy decisions, and we have to make a case for why people need to spend money on whatever it is we're doing from a seismic and infrastructure standpoint. So communication would be my number one skill that I would say bone up and make sure you can do it.
I would,
Yeah, to Hannah.
yeah, I would 100% echo that. I think that probably one of the most useful things that I did during my grad school and undergrad and postdoc was volunteering to do education and outreach work and spending time kind of teaching geoscience topics to children of different ages, and kind of learning how the way that you explain earthquakes to a first grade class is going to be really different from how you talk about it to a high school class. I think that ability to understand different audiences, and kind of exactly what Allison was saying, you need to be able to, whether you're in industry or in government, kind of pitch what you are working on to that audience and kind of put it in the context of what they value, or what they're able to understand. Not everyone has spent 10 years studying the things that you have studied. So yeah, so I think just that ability to read an audience and communicate technical topics at the level and with the focus that is relevant for that audience is pretty critical.
All right, we'll hear from Robert next.
So I think one of the things that I've, learned over the years is that just being really able to deal with novelty, to deal with things that, are different. And in education, we call it sort of the discrepant event, something that sort of defies what you think to be regular, like a normal thing. And maybe we all of this entire group, probably everybody has that sense, and many of you do too. But I think just the ability to face new situations and to just marshal everything that you have, all the skills and experiences you've had, and to pull them together so that they can help you work through a situation. And again, I think it's something that all of us in the room have, including everyone in the audience. But I think that part, as you move through, you're always going to be dealing with things that you never expected, and it's really being able to sort of collect your thoughts and just to react is a really strong skill to have in terms of and sometimes you may not hit the mark, right? So forgive yourself a little bit if you don't quite do exactly what you think you should have done. But it's just this ability to sort of deal with the unknown, but on a sort of ongoing thing. And I think from my perspective is that the big earthquake could happen in 10 minutes, right? And and I would be immediately involved, and I don't know what to expect, but I know that I've had a lot of training and a lot of great connections with people who are in the room here and worked with over the years. I've learned from them, and I know I'll do my best. So thanks.
Okay, great. So we're going to move into our audience Q&A section now. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A now. We also collected some questions when people were registering via Zoom. So our first audience question is, do you have any advice or strategies for non-traditional students pursuing a career in the geosciences?
I'm not sure if there's any major strategies that I come up with, but frankly, non-traditional students from a consulting standpoint are significantly more valuable. Um, there's life experience there. So if you're, if you're coming out of school, I think we look at it as usually a plus. I just hired a engineer in training fresh out of her master's program, but she's got military experience and some on-the-ground construction experience, and it's super helped her just in the 2 weeks that she's been here. She's got to jump on anybody else that's coming straight out of school. So I would definitely encourage you to consider it. It's not a hindrance by any means to have life experience besides your academic experience.
All right, let's see. Wow, can have an answer from Robert.
Yeah, super fast. So I got my PhD when I was in my late 30s. So I think a lot of people, their trajectory is to get their advanced degree when they're in their 20s. And so I think, and actually my grandfather was an inspiration at some level. He got his PhD when he was 65. And so I think one thing to know is that you're never too old. I think that's an important piece of advice, is that your path may take you, and you may decide one day that you want to do that degree, and maybe a lot of factors throughout the course of your life sort of conspire to, put you in a certain place. But gosh, it's never too late. Do it. Please do it. And do more if you want.
Okay, and so these next questions kind of go into Robert and Hannah's expertise. So for work in the policy sector or at government agencies like the USGS, how do you get into this line of work after a PhD? Is it necessary to get a postdoc? What's the job like at work? What's the job market like if you are graduating this spring and are interested in a government role?
Hannah, you can go first if you want.
Sure. So I mentioned that I did do a science policy fellowship after my postdoc. I would say, kind of addressing the whether you need a postdoc question, it kind of depends on what you're interested in doing in the government. So there are like roles that are much more technical, that maybe having that broader research experience would be helpful. For me, there's nothing that I've done since I left academia that like really needed to have a postdoc. It was just something that I was interested in doing. But yeah, I think that for my current job at FEMA, obviously it's very related to my academic background. But I think that one of the things that made me an appealing candidate was that I had additional experience that was kind of more in the government space, and like I clearly had familiarity with how government agencies work. So I think being able to have that, like doing an internship or maybe applying for, if you're interested in the federal government, like kind of a lower GS job, where you can get some of that experience and see how agencies work. And I mean, each agency has its own like hierarchy that is like its own fun thing to try to understand how to operate within. But yeah, I think that being able to combine those experiences, and I like subsequently, before this job, worked at a DOE national lab developing risk models for energy and water risk assessments. And so I think that that kind of showed an ability to not just be completely like stuck in my technical area that I had academic training in, that I was able to dive into different technical areas and learn new things, which I think most people who do a PhD or spend a significant amount of time going through the like research training process, one of the really critical skills that you learn is how to get into a project that you really know nothing about and do research and learn and bring yourself up to speed. So I think any way that you can kind of flex those muscles and show that you are able to use those skills is really helpful when you're trying to transition into a government job. I don't know if Bob, you have a different perspective, but I think that has been useful for me.
No, I think you gave a really good answer, Hannah. So I'm relatively new to the federal government. I'm actually in my 9th year now, and of course, in the sort of the latter part of my career more than anything else, and so I never really had the opportunity. Once I got my PhD, I didn't really have time to do a postdoc. I needed to get right to work. But I kind of watch, folks who are trying to get into the field, and I know a lot the sort of pathway that a lot of people join the ranks of the USGS is through a Mendenhall postdoctoral fellowship, for example. And many of those folks, of course, are working in the earth sciences and have a sort of very highly technical piece. But of course, one thing, and Hannah knows this well because she's a part of our community, is that we've been really fostering non-science or non-science fields. So what we do a lot of with Shake Alert is social science. So we're spending a lot of time thinking about what people do when they get an alert, what's good messaging and that kind of thing. And so we're trying to change the culture at USGS at some level to get to really look at accepting these sort of what was considered sort of the regular folks to come through the system and really get them involved in things like policy, things like social science, and those sorts of things. And so that's one pathway. The other, of course, is if you happen to be working at an institution, things are a little challenging at the moment. I mean, there's a lot going on, but what we've done is we've actually gotten some people involved through doing if you're working in an institution, doing a detail with the USGS. So you spend, say, a few years or whatever working part of your time with USGS or equivalent agency. And that's another way I've seen people do it. So we've actually gotten some people involved, and then they never left. They're still with us. So there you go. And I hope that helps a little bit, but not a very big answer for that question. So thanks.
Well, next we have a very practical question. How did you find your job? Do you recommend looking online or reaching out to people? And I know for some it may have been some time since you got hired, but kind of recommendations of how did you get your job? We'll go to Brandon.
All right, yeah. So for me, I started working here at Berry right after I graduated, and essentially what happened during my master's program, they came out and were recruiting, and I was able to interview and get a internship. They really liked the work that I did when I was there for the 3 months over that summer, and then I had maybe half a semester. I had one more semester until I graduated, and they had offered me a job once I had finished up my master's program. And so then I started about 3 months after I graduated, and then I've been here since 2019, so almost 7 years.
All right, and let's hear from Allison.
At least in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of infrastructure projects happening right now. So we are all hiring. Engineering, geotechnical engineering specifically, there's not enough of us. And then especially if you are in the geology field and want to get your certified engineering geologist certification, that's another one. There are not enough. Both WashDOT and ODOT require that for a lot of their projects. And so they are unicorns right now. We have plenty of geohazards, both from the climate side that's creating landslides and other problems, and from the seismic side. And so it's becoming increasingly more of a job crunch. So if you want to have a job, I don't see that dip being, I don't see a dip coming in both geotechnical engineering and geology from a consulting standpoint, really anytime soon. So everybody is hiring. You can find them online. It never hurts to reach out to LinkedIn. The professional organizations is a great one. Start going to those meetings and meeting people at the tables. So that's AEG is a American Engineering Geologists. There's several different geology type meetings. You can go to American Society of Civil Engineers meetings, even as a geologist. There's a lot of different options there for professional societies to go out and find out who's there and figure out, talk to more of them about what they do in their job and that type of thing. So I think there's a lot of opportunity out there, at least from the consulting standpoint.
All right, and then Robert?
Yeah, I would actually add, and glad I'm going after Allison. So yes, I think going to professional conferences and those sorts of things I think are important. But I would add something to that is get involved with a professional organization. There are opportunities to be in leadership positions, to serve the community, not just the community itself of the association, but also there's potentially outreach opportunities and other things. And it's really a lot of it has to do with getting to know people, maybe volunteering in an organization that you're passionate about, to get to know people, to understand. I mean, it helps maybe clarify things for yourself about what you want out of life and that sort of thing. I was, of course, everything in my life I sort of attribute to luck in some ways. Um, After the 1994 Northridge earthquake, I knew how to get into the Caltech Seismolab briefing area for the media because my geology professor at Pasadena City College told us how to get into the back through the back door. So I spent most of the day um, sitting in the room watching the reporters talking to Lucy Jones, whom many of you know. And I got to know her at that point, and this was in the mid 90s, and had a relationship, built a relationship with her over the years, stayed in contact, of course, worked with her through my other jobs. And then when this job opened up, she said, "Hey, I think you would be great for this job." So it's yeah, really who you know and then the relationships you build and the connections you make really do count. So thanks.
All right, we'll hear from Brandon and then Tina.
I just wanted to add a little more to what I said earlier, piggyback kind of on what Robert and Allison mentioned. Involvement in organizations while you're, still pursuing your degree is really big because a lot of the, other opportunities that led to me getting the internship for this job kind of came from I was involved with NABG and AGU, even AAPG at one point and probably some other organizations along the way. But being there, having an opportunity to present your research, if you had summer research, or just being there and going to different posters, presentations, getting a chance to network, it goes a long way. And you end up forming relationships, and sometimes down the road you may reach out to them and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of this opportunity," or "Have you heard of this program?" or what this school is doing. So being involved and being active there is clutch. And then, as far as for the oil and gas industry, I don't know how much interest is out there. Um, I know it's very cyclical, and so it deters people from pursuing that. But one thing to keep in mind, there's still opportunities here. There's still oil and gas activity going on, whether here in California, in the Texas, Midland Basin, North Dakota, etc. So there's still opportunities, and you just got to get out there and, like I said, go to conferences, network to find connections and find your way to get a foot in the door.
Yeah, I don't have too much different to add, but just coming from kind of an academia perspective, we've kind of fallen on hard times hiring wise, but I imagine things will bounce back eventually. I think what really helped me was luck, of course, as Robert pointed out, there's so much of that involved. But also just building relationships and networks early on through, undergraduate research, working with professors at your institution, building those relationships that helped me find a master's institution to go to. At my master's, I made sure that on my committee, I didn't just have people from my own institution, but outside as well. That helped me build that community and then find where to do a PhD. Another one has been working with USGS. So even though I'm in academia, I've often had USGS collaborators and people on committees and such. And that's been really wonderful and has helped kind of now that I have my own graduate students, a pipeline for them into USGS jobs. So yeah, just continuing to build that network. Don't get isolated within your own institution, but look outside as well for that. And then I just jotted down to just like, don't be afraid to volunteer, like self-invite to a like field work. And, you know, I wasn't afraid to just say like, hey, do you guys need an extra hand on that project or that field work? And that really helped when I was looking for a job to have that big network of people that knew me.
All right, and then to Hannah.
I'll keep this short, but one thing that I think is really helpful, especially if you're trying to figure out what you want to do, and especially if you're maybe a little bit shy and not quite ready to like dive into like hardcore networking, is informational interviews. Like just kind of cold call, like sending emails out to people who you think seem like they're doing something that you're interested in, and seeing if they can like take half an hour to chat with you about it. People love talking about themselves. You can see all of these people on this call talking about our own career paths. But I think people frequently will be happy to help out. And you can use that opportunity to just like ask for recommendations of other people that that you can talk to. Based on that conversation, they'll kind of hear a little bit about what your interests are. And it's a good opportunity to kind of learn about opportunities in different areas that you might be interested in.
All right, we're almost at the top of the hour, but we'll try and get one more quick question in. What certifications or courses, if any, have been useful to your career path?
I already said it, but I mean, we have professional engineer and professional geologist certifications, but that engineering geologist certification is super valuable right now in Oregon and Washington. So if you're kind of looking towards your career path, figuring out where you can be mentored to do that and get that certification, you will always have a job.
Okay. Any other last notes from the panelists? Okay, well then, as we're just about to hit the top of the hour, we'll wrap up there for today. So thank you again so much to all of our panelists and our organizers, and thank you to everyone for joining.